Their resolve is strong. It's hard. This is the next step. Don't let it rip. It's time to go. Thank you, Coach.
Good afternoon. Let's go here. The Maize and Blue review. We're here every day, right around this time. Try to get here exactly at 1 o'clock. We got lots to talk about, including the college football semifinal that Michigan lost to Georgia, 34-11 in. I'll talk about that one. What happened? What now? And we'll look ahead. College football season, just with that one game remaining now, with an all SEC final of Alabama and Georgia. So what happened? I feel like in some ways that I need to apologize, because analyzing that game, I thought Michigan had a real good chance. I liked Michigan's chances because of the way that, they had played the final 2 weeks of the season. I liked the offense and the different ways that they could attack. I like how the defense looked like they had came together and learned from that Michigan State game. And, the team had come together, but they ran into a better team. They ran into a buzzsaw and a team that had them at every turn, game-wise. I mean, that was the worst. It was an absolute nightmare scenario right off the bat, just looking at how Georgia's offense was able to go right down the field. Michigan, maybe it was because Dax Hill wasn't out there right away, and there just was some confusion. And a guy that I thought Michigan, one of the paths to victory, I thought was because Michigan would be able to get to Stetson Bennett. And, that was going to be one of the keys there. But, Bennett walked up to the line and a run play, and he looked out to the left side or the right side, and he saw the corners giving him 10 yards, and he just said, let's go. Threw it right out there to him. Then these guys are taking off down the field. The tight end, which we talked an awful lot about, you can see, what a great player he is. And just really across the field, you can see all the great players there that Georgia had, and, how they came to play in that game. And it was quite a performance there by the Dogs against the Wolverines. So, I mean, what happened. Now you turn the page to the offseason. I can remember, and especially here in the Harbaugh era, that first bowl win. And, and it'd say you do build momentum into the offseason. And what you do is if you get a bowl victory, you wait so long, you have the season and, except the bye week, you have games every week. And, then you have to wait 3 weeks, month, maybe sometimes a little bit more to play in those, the bowl games. So then it's, it's a huge wait. And then finally, you get another game. And if you win, it really feels like, whether you're a fan or a media, you have something, your last reference point, even though it's going to be a completely different season, completely different team. You have something to look back at, and you feel like, oh, hey, they got something to build on. They really have something when they win. And I don't believe it in the NFL. There's so many changes that go on in the NFL, and I'd heard it so many times with the Lions before, like, oh yeah, there's going to be a springboard, these late season wins when you're out of it. And I used to say, I believe it in college, but I don't know. I mean, you feel good. Can you take that momentum into the off season? How long does that last? I'm saying all this, you want to get to the college football playoff. That's what it's all about. But, to have that kind of performance and get beat down that bad, and now, have your head spinning where you come back and you're like, wow, is it worth it? And, it was worth it. It's worth it. It's worth, you're able to measure yourself against the best and just see how far, you have to go. And I think really that's what comes out of it when, you're Michigan and you get in there, you had a terrific season, but a really bad ending there. You're able to go back and say, okay, where do they have to get better? If they want to compete with Alabama and Georgia. And the first thing you say is you got to do better. You got to do better on the recruiting front. I think I think we can all agree on that. Alabama and Georgia, they have been, along with Ohio State and Clemson, those have been the teams that have mopped up, that have dominated. They've dominated on the field, but they've also dominated bringing in the players. I mean, it's not everything, but if you want to get into that college football playoff, and then if you want to advance and win, it almost is everything when you take a look at the teams that have had success in the times that they've went to the CFP. The teams that rank number 1, number 2, number 3 in the recruiting rankings, year in and year out, they're the ones. It's the same teams that are in the college football playoff, so it's not too far away. Now, Michigan, they enjoyed a little bit of a bump, with this season being able to beat Ohio State and being able to win the Big Ten, and we'll get to it in the Michigan recruiting spotlight coming up. But they've got some chances and some work to do, here before the next thing. You say what can happen next. It is February the 2nd, the late signing period. And, Michigan has some players that in a big time player that they can end up getting. And, that could be, a signal where they're, or an actual move where they're, moving up in the rankings, and, you feel better about, their chances. They got a good team. Now, when you look and say, well, what now? That's next, recruiting and, in the off season for them. But, when you look ahead to next season, Michigan's got a lot of young talent. They got a lot of talent returning, and, they got a pretty manageable schedule. When you look at the non-conference slate of playing Colorado State, Hawaii, and UConn as their first 3 games, and they got Maryland. I mean, those are their first 4 games. Michigan's going to start 4-0 next year until they have to go, down to Iowa, a team that they met in Indianapolis for the Big Ten title. That'll be the first one that you at least have to think about. All right, playing at Iowa, maybe that game will be at night. We always know how difficult it is to play there, but things look pretty good ahead for Michigan, especially when you consider where Michigan had been. There were some people, the question always gets asked, is the season a disaster if they don't end up, beating Georgia? And I was thinking, no, you can't even make a case for that unless you're always saying that unless you win a championship, the season's a disaster. And, that's going to be a miserable existence of a college football fan. You might think that if you're relatively young and you're like an Alabama fan, as Alabama is there all the time. Alabama's put themselves in position where their fans probably do think that if a season doesn't end in a championship, that it's been a disaster. But, there's no other team, even those teams like Georgia, although Georgia this year, it is going to feel like it is maybe not a disaster, but a failure. If it's either, there's only one team that doesn't have a failure. I mean, if you think about that, this is what has to happen. Then you're always going to be miserable, and unless you're an Alabama fan. So I don't know. I don't feel like that. Michigan played 12 games, 13 games this year where they were fantastic, and then they played one where they were terrible. So if you're not always as good as your best performance, you're not as bad as your worst performance. So Michigan's best performance was against Ohio State, and their worst performance against Georgia. So then after that, you go, well, where was their next best performance? Probably against Iowa. You'd look there, and you take a look at it, and you go back. Success on the field helps you out in recruiting, and the thing here is that Michigan has done a pretty good job. Even without getting to win the Big Ten since 2004, they still had around a top 10 class. And then with Jim Harbaugh, if you look over the last 5 years, which I did, played in Georgia, because Georgia averaged out as the second best recruiting class over the 5 years. And Michigan came in at 12. You could see that gap out of the field, what it takes when it's time to win a championship. Michigan is up to 8. This year, they can get a little higher February 2nd if things work out for them. And then, to me, I'm thinking, what now? When people ask what now with Michigan, it's like, they've got to routinely finish now in the top 5. That doesn't mean that this particular class has to end up being ranked in the top 5. I mean, they're 8 right now, according to Rivals. They can get a little bit higher, but after this season, if you want to beat Alabama, and if you want to beat Georgia, you have to, year in and year out, finish in the top 5, heck, and ring the bell a couple times, and feel like you're the top, or second or third class. You've got to do that over and over again. And is that reasonable? Is it reasonable to think that Michigan could do that? Because it's been a long time. They have been up there before, but they haven't stayed there for 4 or 5 years, talking about in recruiting. But things have changed dramatically just over the last year, because now you have the transfer portal that you can hit. And I thought, out of all of the things that are going on, that's the one where Michigan was going to have the disadvantage because of the transfer credits. But here they are in the early going. They've hit the jackpot with Aluska and Olowatimi, the center from Virginia, who's going to take over from Andrew Vastardis. We think presumptively, that he'll be the starter for him. I think that feels safe to say. So they've done a good job there. But your roster management, that's going to be part of it with the transfer portal, and then that recruiting. And is Michigan ready for all of that? I think it feels like that the playing field is leveling out a little bit with the name, image, and likeness. Before we know teams, whether it was going into the gray area or whether just stepping straight in there and straight up paying guys, we know that happened, and we knew that teams were doing it and nobody cared except the teams that weren't. And then, in the end, everybody was like, who cares if they're getting paid? And the NCAA was like, yeah, let's go ahead, go ahead and do it. But when you're already in there, the first in that way, usually they say in business, first in wins. And, so the teams that have been doing that, it's tough to just go in there and start, playing, with the big dogs when it comes to the name, image, and likeness, even though, now you can, go in there and do it. So how they traverse that, I thought that myself that Michigan would come in with a pretty big hammer on the name, image, and likeness, just because of Harbaugh and the creative things that he did, once he came into Ann Arbor, with the satellite camps, the traveling abroad, the signing with the stars. I mean, those are all things that, and then, the way Jim was out on the recruiting trail, milking cows or whatever, the different things that he did. And, you got boosters that were out there, how much ever those, trips for 85 to 100, maybe there were more people, traveling to Italy and, to traveling to France. It feels like there's something, more when it comes to this name, image, and likeness. If you want to compete, talking about, if you want to compete with Georgia and Alabama, and what's it going to be? How are they going to do it? So we'll see on that. And the next big date here, February the 2nd, and they've got a chance. So I don't know, is it reasonable? I asked this question for anybody that's watching. You want to go ahead and send a message in. I'll read those on the air. You're always able to do that. You can follow me on Twitter. You see my @ there, Dennis Fithian. My DMs are always open, so you can send me a message that way if you wanted to get something in on this particular show. Every day I check that and I read the comments. If you're somebody that's the first time person watching this, I'm here every day at 1:00 or listening to it on the podcast. Go ahead and send me a direct message on Twitter. I'll address anything and everything, even if it's off topic, off Michigan football. If there's something else, I'll hit it. I don't know how about all day if I'm going to sit here and talk about my favorite fruit or movies, but go ahead and take a run at that. I want to give you that option that's available there for you. Is it reasonable to think that now Michigan getting to the college football playoff, that they're going to get there again, and that they can finish in the top 5 in football recruiting moving ahead, that this could be a springboard because of name, image, and likeness, because Michigan now, has won the Big Ten, They've beaten Ohio State. That that's going to help them, and that for the next 5 years, is it reasonable to think that they could enter into the conversation in the top 5? I think it's reasonable, but that is also the best case scenario. And it's not as easy. Like we've already seen. Like if I saw something over the last, whatever it's been 9 months, that I saw that Michigan had some kind of advantage in name, image, and likeness, and oh man, this is going to be a real game changer. I haven't seen that. The success on the field, is going to give them a chance that way, and that is the biggest thing. To be able to go out there and and have success. That was the thing that was stopping them a lot with Ohio State, saying, "Hey, you want to come? You want to win? You come here. You want to go to Michigan? You can go ahead and do all those other things." But now Michigan, has that at least in their back pocket. But can they compete with the big dogs to get the absolute 5 stars, the cream of the crop there? If I get to see another tweet or another breakdown of all the 5 stars that Alabama and Georgia I've been collecting over the last 4 or 5 years, and, down where Michigan's at, I mean, it's a canyonous gap. So Michigan needs to close that. Is it reasonable that they can get into the top 5? I think it's reasonable that next year that we should expect them to be coming close to ring the bell on that. And we know there's rivals. There's a couple other different sites that are, ranking the kids. So, I mean, if you're getting close to that, a top 5 class where before they were top 10, I think that's doable. Likely, is it likely that Michigan's going to, I think next year it feels like it's likely, because if it's not, if they go back and, they settle in next year around where they're at now, like right around 10, you can say, well, what, what else do they have to do? Because the landscape has, changed. We just talked about with roster management. I mean, there are ways to, to get in there and, get players. So we'll see, how they're going to do when it comes to that. It's possible there. And, for that, I'm going to get to something I do every day, the Michigan Recruiting Spotlight. I've got a memorabilia minute. I'll still give some thoughts on the Orange Bowl and what lies ahead. But when it comes to the Michigan Recruiting Spotlight, there's 2 players right now that I have zeroed in on. There might be more, but one was a recent offer to a running back out of Texas, and Brandon Justice, who is a recruiting editor. I got that information from him. They are in on Andrew Paul, 3-star running back out of Dallas. Looking for another back there, Lone Star State, at least somebody to keep an eye on. But if there's a big fish and something, that between now, here we are on the 3rd, it's just a month from now, we got the late signing day. You got the big offensive lineman from Seattle, Josh Connerly Jr., and he should be a household name now to Michigan fans. It looks like it's a battle between Michigan and Washington. Washington's got their new coach. So, for them, if you're sitting out there in Seattle and you're a Washington fan saying, hey, we got to keep this guy home, he's right in our own backyard. This is a must recruit. So, they're going to pull out all stops, to be able to get and try to keep Connerly Jr. in there. And you would think that's just going to be a tough task for Michigan or any team, to pull. But Michigan, it seems to be the team to beat. If it's not Washington, the biggest rival there for Connerly Jr., the offensive tackle, who's a 4-star. If Michigan is going to be able to get him out of there, it'd be quite a land here. I did just see today. Now, this is not from Brandon Justice or Josh Henschke putting in a forecast for Connerly, but I did see, as I was doing some reading today, from The Athletic, their lead recruiting guy is a guy, their senior writer who covers the recruiting for The Athletic. He was going over the big guns that were left, this month, and who they're going to pick and all these things. And, his prediction for Connerly Jr. was Michigan. So, there's somebody that thinks, that Michigan obviously is in with a chance when he's going ahead, picking Michigan, for his services. So we'll see how that plays out. Michigan in with a chance. It's something that we'll watch unfold over the next month. And we'll be talking about it, if not daily, probably every other day here when it gets to the Michigan recruiting spotlight portion of this show. It's tough, college football. We love football so much. It gets to the end, and then you have, this the way that it ended here for Michigan. There's a part about it heading in. I have an appreciation for this season. No, it did not end in a national championship. It did end up in a Big Ten championship. So for that, it really has been a terrific season, a fantastic season. Jim Harbaugh was talking about a great season, one of the great seasons in Michigan history. And I think he's right about that. You win the Big Ten, and then now you introduce the new rules. I mean, this is the first time Michigan has been to Indy. So getting a chance to go there and then beat Ohio State. I mean, terrific, outstanding. Now, taking that next step, that's the one where you get smacked down, where if, you don't want to call it a great season. And I feel like, great in a lot of ways, but then when you get to the end and get the bad taste, I'll just want to, take it just a notch down below great. I'll reserve great for, 97. Although, you want to sit around making the argument like, look, if this was under the old rules, Michigan would have been, to the Pac-10, Pac-12, and they'd have played Utah in the Rose Bowl. If they won that, we'd be sitting here talking about, maybe a championship. But it's not under those rules anymore. And it is a fantastic. But I'm not going to argue too much with somebody that just wants to call it a great season. I just say just a tick below that, because of the way, that it ended. But just a bad end to a terrific season for U of M when it comes down. But there's a part about it where there's an appreciation as well, because it had been so long since they had beaten Ohio State, and the feeling from Michigan fans in that whole situation, that game, it was it felt like a long time, and the celebration, you could see it on everybody's faces and everybody that I talked with. So you can't take that away. I mean, it was awesome. The same thing, people that traveled to Indy or watched that game. I mean, the Big Ten title game was awesome, and it was pretty stress-free. And Michigan played great. They played really good again. Stopping just short of great. They played really good in that game. And the thing about getting to the college football playoff this time, there were a couple things. One is that it was it feels like there's a lot of changes coming. One for sure that we know of, the name, image, and likeness. That is a huge change. Transfer portal, that just happened last year. So getting in to the college football playoff with these old rules, I had an appreciation for that. This was not 4 years from now, and hopefully as we sit around talking about the name, image, and likeness. Hopefully Michigan is able to take advantage of that, and it does show up in the players that they're bringing in, and it does even up the playing field, with the SEC and Ohio State and Clemson, and Michigan's going to be in with a better chance, and this isn't going to be just a once in a decade or so, type opportunity for them. But this particular trip was under the old rule, so I appreciate that. And you just start looking ahead. I would like to, if they don't have a leader for college football, but if I was brought in, they love having committees. Everybody likes committees. I'd like to sit on that committee. I'd be like, yeah, let's get more teams involved. I mean, I'm sure the SEC just wants to stay with a Final Four, because here they are. They got two teams in the finals. But you know what? Everybody else wants to expand it a little bit. And if your argument is, so what, we're going to end up getting to, the SEC anyways, my argument would be, you know what, you want to keep some of the star players and get them in a playoff format instead of opting out. This is going to be one of the ways to do that. You want to have games that are played at teams' home site in a playoff situation. What Michigan fan doesn't want to see a team? You don't want to see Miami come up or Florida come up for a USC, Alabama, any of them. You want to see them come up and play in some cold weather in a playoff situation. Everybody wants to see that. So, yeah, that's coming. And So Michigan being able to get in when, under these rules where there were just 4 to see how they would fare. Unfortunately, we saw how they would fare, but, now when we look ahead, getting into a 12 team, you're going to have more teams and, Michigan, you would think more than once in a while, they'll be involved in a 12 team playoff situation. Even if they drop their, final regular season game, they would have a shot, to get in there. So that's what you're looking ahead to. And, you get an appreciation for this year. A couple of things that Harbaugh said. One, he said, it feels like a start. It feels like a beginning after the game. Those are good comments. The last comment and the one that I started the show with, you had to feel pretty fired up. They do those interviews right at the beginning of the game. Coaches rarely say anything. Hey, we're just going out there. We talked to them. We're ready to go. Harbaugh, he had to fire you up when he said this to ESPN to Marty Smith on the sideline.
The resolve is strong. It's hard. This is the next step. Go let it rip. It's time to go. Thank you, Coach.
Yeah, go let it rip. And it didn't happen, but that was the last part. Like for this season, that was the pinnacle of this season. Harbaugh, let it rip. Everybody, if you were a Michigan fan, I don't know, you couldn't have been any more fired up about everything in that particular point when they said, let it rip. Then they kicked off, and then, the thing, really went downhill there. But, that's it. And, you look from the turnovers to the tip passes to the drops to the football, getting lost in the lights or wrong routes or I don't know, whatever else was going on there, schemes. Can they learn something from that? The thing, Michigan, I think we can all agree, they are not built. They were never going to win a game. If you picked Michigan to win, they weren't coming back from 27-3. They had to have that game in the low 20s. They had to create extra possessions. The defense had to hold Georgia down a little bit. And, you could see with the first 2 drives and the first 5 drives, that they scored. I mean, that game was over quickly. And, just Michigan didn't have a chance, they needed a game that was going to be within a score or 2 and get into the fourth quarter. And, that never happened. So when you get out of a situation where it's not something that you can do, that it's certainly not accustomed to, they weren't built that way. That wasn't going to happen. So it got away from them quick and it was over fast. And some people like games like that. It wasn't until, I don't know, about 5-6 years ago, actually, a friend of mine who's a Georgia fan, and when Georgia played Alabama and Tagovailoa came in the second half and Jalen Hurts was benched because he wasn't, getting the ball out fast enough or whatever, just needed, a jump in the passing game. Obviously, Tagovailoa gave him that and ended up making the big play in overtime. But I remember talking with my friend who was the Georgia fan. I thought, man, what a great game, awesome game. And he said, I'd rather if that got over in the first quarter. And I said, yeah, but you know what? You've got something you'll remember forever. That was so awesome. He said, no, I don't like a game like that. And, what I was surprised is I brought that to the air doing, some talk radio. What I was surprised about is there were so many fans that were like my friend, who were like, oh, yeah, I don't want – they would rather have seen a game like Michigan, Georgia, being a Michigan fan. Of course, you wanted to win, but one that you actually have, your hopes dashed immediately, not one like when Georgia played Alabama that went all the way to the end. You thought you were going to win maybe 10, 15 times, lose the same amount of times, and ultimately right at the end of the final play, whoa, it's a real dagger. But I would rather have that. But like I said, I was surprised to see how many people were like, yeah, I want it over quick if it's going to happen ultimately. So there you go. All right. I think I have that part all covered here. It is on to the memorabilia minute. And for that, we get to, I'm going to still talk about it. If I hope to talk about football, some aspect every single day. And it's still, football, even in the off season, try different ways to get the football conversation, whether it's bringing people on or just talking about it myself. We'll continue to hit football and talk about it, but it is on the basketball season. Michigan with a trip to Piscataway in the offering for tomorrow, in a game that, they need to change some perceptions around with the way things have been going here for the Hoops team. A part of that will be, starting tomorrow's game. I already know they played a couple Big Ten games here, and they, people, for rightfully so, are, down on the expectations for U of M. I am too. I don't, if you're going to tell me, is this team a tournament team? Like, it doesn't look like it, right now, but in these next couple games, head to Rutgers. But the memorabilia minute here is an old card from the early to mid 90s here. It's a Juwan Howard, old classic Michigan basketball card. I had to look it up, thinking, like, am I holding on to a $50 card or something here? No, it was selling for 99 cents, but it's a pretty cool card anyways. And there it is for the memorabilia minute. Don't forget, every day, 1:00, we'll come in here and we'll talk Michigan. We take your questions as well. And then after every basketball game, football game as well, but just remember, after the basketball game, we'll come on the post game and talk about the Wolverines on the hardwood as well. So, all right, that'll do it here. We'll be back here tomorrow, 1:00, and then after the basketball game as well. Thanks for watching, and talk to you later. Bye.